God's will is for you to be filled with faith in these last days. He wants you to be so full of faith in Him and what He can do and how he can move in your life and move in others. And that's what this whole series is about, helping you to have faith in these last days. That's what we're going to be continuing in today. This is John Dowler of Prayer Builders in Winona, Minnesota. And today I want to look at a story that we're well familiar with. But I want to bring this up. You know, we've been looking at how in Matthew chapter 10, in verses 9 and 10, Jesus said He sent forth His disciples. And when He did, He told them not to take any ability to provide for themselves. He basically told them to go with nothing. Don't go with your billfolds, credit cards, debit cards. Don't take any extra food with you. Don't pack any extra clothes. Basically go out and trust God to take care of your needs. And then after this was all over, just before the Garden of Gethsemane, He said, did you lack anything? This whole time, when that was basically the standard you had to abide by, have you lacked anything this whole time? And they said nothing. He says, okay, now you can take it. Lesson learned. Well, after He had done it, now it's one thing to go out and just believe God for your needs. But then it is another thing. And there were two specific instances of miracles where Jesus fed thousands of people. Now, when He did that, was He just doing that just to show people that He was God? No, because some people would follow Him because of the signs, but that didn't mean that they even believed who He was. They could have just been with Him because of the signs. I mean, right now, if there's people just out there doing signs, there's people that follow people just because they're doing supernatural things, and it's not of God. So that's not but here, Jesus specifically, when He did this and He interacted with the disciples, I want to show you this in Matthew chapter 14. It says in verse 15, they had had a massive time of ministry. People had been following Jesus, and there were multitudes there. And it says in Matthew 14:15, it says, when it was evening, the disciples came to Him and said, this is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. Now, victuals was the old-time King James language for food. Send these, they're coming to Jesus. Send these people away so that they can go buy food. And it says Jesus, now look at this. This is amazing. Jesus said in the next verse 16, it says, but Jesus said unto them, they need not depart, give ye them to eat. Look at this. He said, they do not need to leave. Now, I'm not going to say it in King James. He basically said, you feed them. Now, what was the purpose behind this? Like, there were some obvious purposes. One purpose was, we see Jesus, always remember, He's God. He's God there in the midst. God's always wanting to move in the midst. He's always wanting to take care of people in the midst. So one primary thing that needed to be accomplished here was He wanted to see people fed. He did not want people fainting. And it says, and they said to Him, but we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And He said, bring them here to me. Okay, so He set this up, and when He said, I want you to feed them, that was a faith stretcher. That was a lot bigger thing of them just believing for their meal when they went into the next town to minister and go share the gospel with people. That was a much bigger demand on their faith than just believing for their own needs. When you have 5,000 people, and it says down at verse 21, it says, when they had eaten, which were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So you had 5,000 men. Well, usually the women are at least generally the women are, at least in a religious setting, the women are at least 2-to-1 usually over the men. The men are usually probably home watching football or something. So if there was 5,000 men, there was probably at least, they estimate, I mean, just by natural estimates, there's probably at least double that of women. Because more women generally are religiously inclined than men. The men are harder to get to come out. And then, whenever you have a woman, she's normally not by herself. Normally with a woman, there could be 1, 2, 3, or however many kids, because it said children were here. So easily, we could have been over the 20,000 mark. And Jesus was telling them, they said, we just have 5 loaves and fishes, bring them to me. Now, this was a supernatural thing of provision. What this was going to do, right now, the disciples' faith was literally being stretched. They were being faced with a need that they had no way to meet. And Jesus was showing them that with God, anything's possible. God can satisfy any situation. God can meet the need in any situation. And you don't need to be in doubt about it. Do you know that the primary times where Jesus upbraided, where the Bible in the King James says that he upbraided the disciples, that was always in instances of unbelief and not having faith. Right here, this instance was not just to feed these 5,000. This was to stretch their faith and literally show these disciples the ability of God so that they could be persuaded. And he said, you're going to feed them in this. Why? Because I want you to be involved in these miracles, because you need to have faith for what you're being called to do and what you're going to do after I leave. And I've died, I've been resurrected, I'm going to the Father. You're going to have to be believing for this all through the book of Acts. You're going to have to be doing this. This is going to be up to you. So this was a lesson, and let's just go ahead and read it. It says, and he says, bring the people to me. And it says, he commanded them, verse 19, the multitude to sit down on the grass, and he took 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And looking up to heaven, he blessed them and brake it, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they all did eat. Now see, he took it. Now here's what happened. The miracle literally was, the biggest part of this miracle was being performed in the hands of the disciples. When Jesus broke the bread, he only had to break it. Like if it says that he commanded them. It says when they came to him. Now, if he was doing this, however many of his disciples, he wasn't having to break it as much. When they would each have, just the disciples had their portions of being broken. But the real miracle was being performed when they went to their sections of the multitude, and they had a smaller section in their hand than Jesus initially had in his hands. And they start breaking and separating, and it doesn't run out, and it doesn't run out, and it doesn't run out, and it doesn't run out. And everyone gets fed. And then some people have seconds, and some people might have thirds, because it said when they were all filled. When they were all filled, and then it says there was 12 baskets left over. A supernatural multiplying miracle. And see, God has a precedent of doing these kind of things. God has always met the needs of his people. When the children of Israel was in the land, in the wilderness, the whole reason they went in the wilderness, God just didn't have a wilderness experience planned for them. The whole reason that they ended up in the wilderness was because they didn't have faith to go take Jericho, go take the land of Canaan. They didn't have faith. They did not have faith. They said, there's giants in the land. We can't do this. And then 2 of the spies said, well, yeah, we can do this. Let's go take it right now. With God, we're able. God's already said this is ours. And 10 of the 12 said, no, we can't do this. This is how God works. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to close with this today, but I'm just wanting to encourage you. The real miracle was being done in the hands of these disciples. And the thing was, he only had so much time here. And while he was here, he was constantly doing things to them that was going to expand their faith, so that when he was gone and he was resurrected and seated at the right hand of God the Father, they were going to remember this. They were going to remember these times when they were about their ministry. And they were going to, these things are marking them, showing them God is always able. And I'll tell you what, that's the way it's been in my life. God has always been able. God has always taken care of me. God has always provided in every situation, and he always will. There is always a way. There is always an answer. There is always provision. But you have to believe that. You have to be persuaded of it, just like I am. And that's what this is all about. So anyway, I hope this was a blessing to you today. Be ready to tune in next time. And I don't want you to forget this. Jesus is coming back.